The year 1066 has been indelibly linked to William the Conqueror, the Norman king whose victory at the Battle of Hastings seized the English crown, an event that would have an enormous impact on future European history. But for every event that becomes gilded in history as a turning point, thousands of more become overshadowed, and in this case there was another battle fought just weeks before and involving the same English king. But instead of earning him eternal glory like William the Conqueror, this battle ended the reign of a Viking king, and in doing so, ended an entire era in history. The demise of the Viking Age. The incredible journey and life of Harald Hardrada, King of Norway, deserves to be remembered. Harald Sigurdsson was born in Norway around 1015, the son of Asta and Sigurd Syr, according to the Nordic saga Heimskringla. Asta was the wife of the king of Vestford, who was murdered trying to cheat on his wife and marry another. Already pregnant, Asta married Sigurd Syr, king of Ringerike, and gave birth to her first husband's son, Olaf. With Sigurd, she had 3 more sons, the youngest being Harald. According to later sagas, though his father Olaf was the descendant of Harald Fairhair, the first king of Norway, who first united the kingdom, Harald too would be given a lineage connecting him to the first king. Historians are less certain about that claimed ancestry, which may have been fabricated to support their later kingships. Olaf was ambitious, and with the help of his mother secured for himself the throne of Norway. His rule was a brutal one, and he secured his power by subduing the aristocracy and projecting his power, securing the Orkney Islands and even raiding Denmark. His victories, however, turned against him. In 1029, Knut the Great, king of Denmark, invaded Norway. Olaf attempted to retake his throne a year later, but was killed in the Battle of Stiklestad. Harald, 15, fought at the battle, but defeat forced him into exile with the Kievan Rus. Injured in his retreat, he wrote, "From copse to copse, I crawl and creep now, worthless. Who knows how high I'll be heralded one day." Reaching the Rus, located largely in modern-day Ukraine, Harald found sanctuary in the court of Grand Prince Yaroslav the Wise. Harald was made a captain in the Kievan army and fought in numerous campaigns for the Kievan prince. He likely fought against the Poles in 1031, may have participated in many other campaigns in Estonia, against the Byzantines, and against other forces on the steppes. Snorri's saga Heimskringla says he traveled far and wide in the eastern land. After several years, he left Yaroslav's service for Constantinople. The Byzantine Empire had employed foreign soldiers for more than a century. Kievan Rusians had been in such service as early as 874. In 988, the Guard was formally constituted with 6,000 Varangians, the Byzantine term for Scandinavians. Political loyalties could often shift in Constantinople, so the Vikings were brought into service specifically as guards to the emperor. Harald joined the Varangian Guard with his soldiers, a great suite of men, possibly as many as 500. The Varangians were renowned fighters, with one contemporary source writing that they attacked with reckless rage and neither cared about losing blood nor their wounds. With the Byzantines, he fought on nearly every frontier of the empire. According to Snorri, he quickly became leader over all the Varangians. He was described in one source as the thunderbolt of the north, a pestilence to all. He fought Arabian pirates, because don't all good stories involve pirates? And against the Muslim Caliphate, where Snorri says he captured 80 castles. He may even have gone to Jerusalem. Of course, the saga tales cannot be taken at face value, but that he participated in these campaigns seems likely. By 1038, he and the Varangians were dispatched to Sicily to recapture the Muslim emirate there. Snorri records Harald capturing 4 towns in these campaigns, including one by faking his own death and gaining entrance to the castle via his own coffin. The Byzantines ultimately abandoned their campaign in Sicily, and after that Harald fought in southern Italy and Bulgaria. He was so successful there that he was dubbed Bulgar Burner in the sagas. Harald was held in high regard in Byzantium, and a Byzantine record indicates he was liked by the emperor and his wife Zoe. The emperor's death, however, instigated dynastic strife. The emperor's nephew took the throne, and fighting began between him and the empress. Harald was arrested, possibly due to his association with the previous emperor. The sagas say it was for refusing to marry Zoe, while other sources claim he was arrested for defying a noblewoman or even for murder. A revolt shook the city, and in the chaos, Harald was able to escape prison, although how is not firmly recorded. Some of the Varangians defended the emperor, but Harald seems to have led his own men in support of the revolt. Thousands died in the fighting in Constantinople, and the emperor eventually fled to a monastery and took monastic vows, giving up the throne. When he was found, however, he was arrested, blinded, according to the sagas, by Harald himself, castrated, and banished. In the service of the Byzantines, Harald had become a rich man. He secured his money by sending it to Kiev and Rus, who kept it safe. Part of his wealth likely came from palace plunder, where a new emperor either allowed looting or bribed the Varangians to assure loyalty. 2 emperors died while he served, in addition to the one he blinded. He escaped Constantinople in secret, allegedly because Empress Zoe forbade him from leaving, and sailed into the Black Sea. He apparently remained on good terms with the empire, however, because a Byzantine scholar wrote that Harald maintained loyalty and love for it even after he became king of Norway. On Harald's return to Rus, he married one of Yaroslav's daughter, also a granddaughter of the king of Sweden. Yaroslav also attacked Constantinople, likely with the intelligence from his new Norse son-in-law. The year was 1045, when the 30-year-old veteran warrior was finally prepared to return to Norway and take his throne. There, Harald's nephew, Magnus, an illegitimate son of Olaf, had become king of Norway and Denmark. Harald hoped to take the throne himself and threatened war by allying with Swin II to claim the Danish throne. His advisors, however, thought it would be a great misfortune if relations should fight and throw death spears at each other. Possibly concerned about the hardship of possible war, instead the pair came to an agreement of co-rulership of Norway. Magnus retained the Danish throne. In return for half of Norway, Harald gave Magnus half his wealth. Their brief co-rule was not harmonious, and the sagas recount disagreements between the two kings that nearly came to outright battle. Magnus died suddenly, however, in 1047, at only 23 years old. Snorri's saga writes that Magnus had a dream of his father and was given the choice to either follow Olaf into death or become a great king. Magnus asked his father to choose for him. Historical accounts differ, with some saying that he fell off his ship, others blaming an illness, and yet others claiming that he fell off a horse. The sagas say he made Harald king of Norway, but gave Denmark to Sweyn. Harald would spend years trying to recapture Denmark, only ceasing in 1064. Costly but indecisive battles followed, forcing the kings to make peace. Harald ruled Norway firmly, especially through the use of his Hird, private army maintained by Norwegian lords. In the past, others beside the king had been allowed to maintain herds, but Harald made it so he alone was allowed, centralizing power beneath his throne. He was known to kill and maim farmers, who he claimed withheld taxes as a warning to those who were disloyal, and used force liberally. His rule and accomplishments led to his most famous epithet, the name Hardrada. Though linguists and historians have long argued over the best translation of the word, suggested translations include stern counsel, hard ruler, tyrant, ruthless, severe, or resolute. Harald began what Norwegian historian Knut Helle termed the national territorial unification of Norway. He has also established a monopoly over the minting of coins, which was successful in increasing international trade. According to Adam of Bremen, he explored the seas north of his kingdom, and having searched the length of the northern ocean in his ships, finally had before his eyes the dark, failing boundaries of the savage world, that is, the abyss of the world's edge. Failing to capture Denmark did not end Harald's ambition. According to a 1038 agreement between Magnus and then King of England Harthacnut, if one died, the other would inherit his lands. Harthacnut died in 1042, and Magnus had planned to press his claim before he died. England had numerous other claimants as well. In England, Edward the Confessor was king, and he alternately hinted that Harald, William of Normandy, or even Sweyn of Denmark might succeed him. In 1066, Edward died, and Harold Godwinson was named King of England. Godwinson's brother, Tostig, once an Earl of Northumbria, made contact with both William and Harold, and in fact might have helped to instigate what would become 2 invasions of England that year. By September of 1066, Harald was ready to attack. He made his eldest son king of Norway and took his wife, daughters, and a younger son with him, along with a large army. He gathered more soldiers at Orkney and Shetland and received several thousand allies from Scotland, with 300 longships, according to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. Snorri wrote that Harald had over 200 ships apart from his supply ships. They began in the northernmost part of England by plundering the coast and forcing Northumbrian towns to surrender. The first real battle was fought on September 20th, when the Earls of Northumbria and Mercia met the Norse at the Battle of Fulford. The English force was decisively routed, but King Godwinson arrived shortly after with his own army. Godwinson had marched 200 miles over day and night to reach the battlefield on September 25th, and Harald was caught completely off guard when the English appeared at Stamford Bridge. According to Snorri, King Godwinson himself rode to meet Tostig and Harald and offered Tostig his earldom to betray the Norse king. Asked what he would give Harald, the English king answered, 7 feet of English ground, as he is taller than most men. In other words, a grave. According to Snorri, the Norsemen left much of their armor aboard their ships. It was a warm day, and they hadn't expected to meet English resistance. They were described as very carefree. English sources say that Godwinson's army was held at the titular bridge by a single huge Norseman, long enough for Harald's army to form a shield wall. The Vikings were outnumbered, numbering between 6,000 and 8,000 to the English 10,000 to 15,000, along with cavalry. Several thousand Vikings had been left with the ships. Harald sent for them immediately. Snorri writes that the English cavalry could not do much against the Viking shield wall until the wall broke as a number of Norsemen chased the cavalry. As soon as they were ahead of their line, the cavalry struck hard, and King Harald himself rode to the fray. He was in a rage and ran out in front of the array and hewed down with both hands. All who were nearest gave way before him. But alas, his great victory was not meant to be. He was hit by an arrow in the windpipe and died. While fighting continued for hours, eventually Tostig was killed, as were most of the remaining Norsemen. Godwinson allowed the survivors, including Harald's son, to leave. They did so in only 24 of the hundreds of ships that had first brought the army. Godwinson is said to have lost around 5,000 men. The epic of Harald, a young man who, banished from his homeland, battled across the world to become wealthy and renowned, ended on English fields. Though it's difficult to be certain, it's hard not to see the Battle of Stamford Bridge as important for its possible effect on the later Battle of Hastings. Godwinson was forced to raise a new army for the Battle of Hastings, and likely only its core had been present also at Stamford Bridge. The northern earls, too, had little to offer after their defeat at Fulford. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle claims that Godwinson went to battle before all his hosts came up, and the king was warned that you have just returned worn out after the war against the Norwegians. The death of King Harald has long been considered to mark the end of the Viking Age, as the defeat marked the end of any realistic chance of a North Sea empire. The details of the battle itself have long been in question. Many scholars question Snorri's account, as the Anglo-Saxons were not known to use cavalry, but the broad strokes of Snorri's description have been confirmed in sources beyond the sagas. There would be further attempts by the Norse to take England, but they would all end in failure. Still, the King of Norway might have gained some measure of revenge because it was their cousins, the Normans, who would take control of England. In fact, much of the land in England today is still owned by their descendants. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The History Guy. Check out our community on thehistoryguyguild.locals.com, our webpage at thehistoryguy.com, and our merchandise at teespring.com, or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo. And if you'd like more episodes on forgotten history, all you have to do is subscribe.